5e is the mother of all tabletop role-playing games in terms of popularity. It has a very strong fan base with plenty of additional third-party material. For instance, recent surveys show that from 2014 onwards, Dungeons and Dragons was one of the most popular tabletop role-playing games. When you include the rising popularity of actual plays, especially after COVID-19, and additional branding in terms of movies, video games, television, and pop culture, most people can agree that D&D 5e leads the tabletop RPG market. While D&D 5e is a tabletop role-playing game, they are not in the same community, however. D&D fans and the greater tabletop RPG fans / hobbyists have different vested interests despite sharing the same overarching hobby. For instance, the reason there is a D&D subreddit versus a RPG subreddit is because one is focused on D&D and the other is focused on tabletop role-playing games overall. While they may overlap, conversations and community discussions differ alongside approach to GM, player, and design philosophies. However, D&D and its huge dragon-like wingspan bleeds into the TTRPG hobby and other IPs. This has caused 5e and its huge community material to be everywhere even when I think it may not fit. So, in this video, I want to explore how, due to 5e's ubiquity and its humongous fan base, the game expands in many ways where the mechanics may not fit into the game's focus on combat and skill-based challenges. This phenomenon of shoving 5e into a specific IP, a genre, and material that may not always fit, I like to call, personally, Fifthification. So, sit down, grab your favorite D20, and open your favorite homebrew material as we explore this bizarre aspect that all of us tabletop enjoyers love and hate, Fifthification. Fifthification is a process of a game, material, IP, or product that becomes essentially 5e material and/or its entire focus is on 5e. In its early phases, the game or product in question is made without or with little consideration of adapting to 5e or exists largely as a separate entity from the game. That game or product or IP slowly shifts by mechanizing systems, ideas, arts, books, and concepts around D&D 5th edition or their additional material. This is largely because of market reasons for the producers wanting to reach a higher audience, more specifically the 5e market. My term pulls directly from the term Enshitification. Enshitification, known also as crapification or platform decay, is a process in which a product or service that was originally high quality and good to users eventually becomes poor. Cory Doctorow coined the term in 2022 to argue, open quote, a pattern decline in the quality of online platforms resulted from capitalistic incentives, close quote. The process comes in 3 general steps. 1. The user experience is exciting and compelling at first. The product on the onset for the company is generally high quality. 2. As time goes by, the product or platform exploits the users in order to gain the most revenue. In this case, using paid content or ads. 3. When users and business customers are locked into the platform, the goal is the pursuit of short-term profits at the expense of customer satisfaction and trust. Companies, as stated by Park and others within this article, state, in low competition markets, companies can treat customers poorly with the knowledge the unhappy ones have few alternatives. Vendor lock-in is part of the strategy and, when practiced to its extreme, can result in regulatory and legal allegations of monopolistic practices. So, Fifthification pulls from the Enshitification loosely and applies it to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Likewise, Fifthification comes into 3 steps. First, a game or product that is within the greater tabletop RPG ecosystem is created largely as a separate entity from 5e. This could be a module, adventure book, supplemental material, a specific tabletop RPG, or art. The product or IP exists as a piece without the need to be specifically a 5e game or supplemental material. The game ultimately stands as its own. 2. As time goes by, however, developers notice the potential missing revenue from not expanding, or they see an opportunity to expand their IP, product, or idea into something that can theoretically fit into 5e. So they start to slowly pivot their current work, or they start to create work that feels hard to fit into a 5e module, adventure, or piece of game. 3. Seeing the potential gains, they are moving to creating a 5e product. This means creating modules and player material of an IP that may not fit. This is not stating that all third-party support material is created for 5e, or rather is what some may call 5e slop. 5e slop is different, I think. I consider 5e slop to be anything that is streaming low-effort AI-generated content or rage-bait content that is meant to gain the person money quickly without any actual investment or artistic integrity. Fifthification is the process of a product or concept or a company changing into a 5e game or 5e focused, say, production line to capture a bigger market. For instance, take the Battles of Eldamon Legends Kickstarter, which is Pokemon-inspired material for D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It is stylish looking, has a clear artistic intent, and is genuine product that was made by passionate people. While it does try to fit in the world of Pokemon into 5e, it's not slop, and I think calling it slop would, well, be kind of rude to the creators. On the other hand, any amount of AI slop on Kickstarter is because it is trying to capture the 5e market without putting in the creative, business, and or strategic decisions to make a successful product. To illustrate this, we will be using Traveller 5e as a case study. Traveller 5e is from World's Largest RPGs. It is being led as well by Game Designers Workshop and veteran Timothy Brown in coordination with Mongoose Publishing. Traveller 5e, starting off phase 1, is based on the original Traveller from 1977. Traveller is a science fiction role-playing game that was first published in 1977 by Game Designers Workshop. The game in the 1970s was a simulationist game about traversing deep space, managing resources, exploring planets, and selling goods, all while surveying the mundane, horrifying, and political, whether it's planetside or starboard. Mechanically, I'll focus on Traveller 2e by Mongoose, given that is what I have played the most of, though I have played a little bit of classic Traveller. Traveller historically, in many of the editions, is a skill-based game. You roll a 2d6 plus your attribute modifier plus your skill modifier plus any other additional modifiers depending on the scenario. There's also the aspect of effects. When you succeed or fail a check, you get a +3 or -3 to a task chain. Essentially, the tasks and effects and task chains allow for a flexibility in your rolls. So that means that situations don't always need to be an all-sum resolution due to task chains representing a version of degrees of success. This is what you may see in a Powered by the Apocalypse game. Character creation-wise, Traveller's Life Path system is one of its most defining characteristics. The Life Path system is a series of career and or educational terms that your character goes through before starting their traveling journey. And once your characteristics are rolled and your background skills are chosen at age 18, your PC goes through multiple terms. These terms are decisions your character made in their career. For example, all PCs start out into Term 1. Term 1 is where you can do pre-career education, such as university or military academy, or you can go straight into a career. From there, you roll dependent sometimes on your characteristics and follow out what happens as your character goes through each term of their life. Your character could go through military academy and have a successful career, but by Term 4 decide to become a colonist. Maybe your character is absolutely trashy and fails at a university, and is instead drafted as a Navy soldier. Maybe your character gets thrown into prison, and after years of being in prison, you get out and decide to start your journey as a traveler. The life path is unique because it allows you to flesh out your character and their backstory, as well as the other player characters. This life path system is why Traveller is one game that I laud for its ability to be played solo. Solo by Zozer Games is one example of Traveller being played solo. Ultimately, the life path system is a game in its own right that can allow for endless customizability. I give all this context because Traveller, prior to Traveller 5e being announced, has existed for quite some time. These unique mechanics are part of Traveller's DNA. As we will see, this DNA does come into concerns given the fact that 5e and Traveller, while they may have came out technically in the same era, play a little differently. Phase 2. Building up credit. Traveller is by no means the most popular tabletop RPG, amongst specifically tabletop RPG nerds. In terms of funding, and we're talking about in the 2020s, and more specifically I believe this was from 2024, aka 2025, RPGs like Alien RPG, Shadow Dark, Fabula Ultima, and Cypher were extremely well funded. In terms of the most popular non-D&D systems, Traveller is not anywhere in the top echelons included in data from Group Finder in 2026 and Roll20's report from 2020. Understandably, this lack of popularity is from many varying factors. Referencing our Traveller for veterans will give us a various amounts of opinions on why Traveller is not more popular in 2026. Artistically, the game was never that exciting to begin with. The game, especially early Classic Traveller, was not compelling artistically. This has changed drastically in later editions, obviously, but the art style was not evocative. The little black books that Classic Traveller is known for are not as exciting as, say, what was coming from TSR during the 70s and 80s. TSR understood in the 80s the importance of art in their adventures. It is why even as D&D struggled with games like BTM, the art even to this day is still well recognized. Blogs account the magnificent art they would see from the red box set to other things. For example, David Trampier's 1E AD&D Player's Handbook cover, Larry Elmore's iconic red box set of basic D&D, Clyde Caldwell's famous Ravenloft cover, or Jeff Easley's 1E AD&D Monster Manual number 2. Ultimately, this art and much of the art inside of these respective books is still fondly remembered. Whereas, if you look at Classic Traveller, that's not the same issue. Another aspect is that maybe not embracing Star Wars early on hurt the game's popularity. While I will argue that Traveller is better not as a space opera, I do think early in the game's career it did not capitalize on the popularity of the Star Wars franchise during the original 3 movies. Furthermore, character creation and more specifically the life path system, while unique for the time, were super rigid. This rigidness was an intentional design choice, and while it is intentional, this is going to be a big drawback, especially for players that have a specific character idea in mind. This will come ahead for players who are especially keen on high customizability and or having full control over what their characters are and how they develop. This will come ahead for players especially as people wanted more customizability in the characters as RPGs grew in popularity and with the advent of actual plays and consuming RPGs not as just simply a game to play at a table, but for entertainment. It is in part why Mongooses Edition has pre-gens and starter packs so that players can have some more flexibility in character creation and get right back into the game if, say, a player or rather a character dies. The game is also not intending to be flashy. The game has trouble, especially Classic, of capturing an evocative space opera or more science fantasy elements, or a very hard-coded sci-fi. This game is more about normal people or somewhat normal people in space dealing with diplomacy, bureaucracy, and resources in the unknowns of space. Furthermore, marketing and branding was not exactly the most priority, we'll say. Traveller was given to small or medium-sized companies that may not have capitalized on strategic marketing. And strategic marketing being a marketing approach that is focused on larger business goals / long-term financial success based on the needs of marketplace and especially potential customers and quantitative reasons, all that yada yada. While TSR was floundering alongside many other organizations at the time, D&D's IP got bought up by WotC, which capitalized heavily on the market. And we can see that in the latest edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Finally is buy-in. D&D's buy-in was largely about going to dungeon, extracting as many material resources as possible, and then using those resources to grow stronger, powerful, faster. 5e is largely high fantasy where you play epic heroes. Traveller does not inherently have that. In fact, you are playing normal people who are very moral and have to deal with issues like debt and paying off your starship's mortgage. While later editions of Traveller have full campaigns of overarching narratives, the buy-in is not as noticeable as for a franchise like D&D. So these are some of the factors that I saw and that I witnessed on Traveller's Reddit as well as elsewhere. So I can see why D&D would not be as popular, and as a result, Mongoose, as well as some of the other developers, as well as some other creatives in the scene, thought this was a good financial decision to not only bring in new players, but to make some more revenue. Phase 3, Traveling to 5e. Moving into Phase 3, Traveller 5e is the culmination of Traveller's past and D&D 5e's holdover over the market. The backer kit as of May 15th, 2026 has far exceeded its funding goal of 1,977. The fund currently stands at around 850,000 as I check this on recording, and has up to 2,400 nearly backers. It also has a huge amount of pledge levels, ranging from $999 for the all-in bundle to just the core rules starting at $29. Traveller 5e's backer kit page and art is also extremely impressive. It is stylistically beautiful and does capture the feel of Traveller. The project states it will convert classic themes into 5e while providing new classes, subclasses, starships, and illustrations. This conversion is comprehensive by trying to match the needs of one game to another, and for what it's worth, I am partially tolerant. I truthfully believe that Traveller 5e comes from a place of heart and genuineness, especially from the creators who put their time, money, dedication, art, and quite frankly, a lot of moral and mental stress into creating this backer kit. I really and truthfully do not believe they mean any ill intention, and quite frankly, I think it's wrong to assume ill intent, especially in this case. As I was watching the stream from Talisman Tavern for the backer kit, many of the fans are excited about this project, and for young and old fans, I would be excited too. Getting to see new people join in your hobby and your specific game is one of the most refreshing feelings that any RPG enthusiast can share in. So I understand that sentiment and I'm happy for them. But as we can see in Phase 3, it's a bit concerning that the game needs to have this, or rather that there needs to be a 5e version of Traveller. Especially since, well, as we could understand from Phase 1, just based upon the mechanics, the life path system and the task chain systems are a bit different than what 5e intends as its core play. Traveller 5e is emblematic of Fifthification. The project looks pretty, but the backer levels feel bloated, especially in comparison to other indie games, and questions remain. How do you inseminate the core themes of Traveller into a high fantasy game system that is largely focused on combat and, well, largely combat? What kind of feelings and experiences will you lose from this conversion? Beyond that, do other developers need to then create 5e conversions to be more successful in creating the game or supporting themselves? Why does Traveller then need to become another game converted to 5e rather than simply being a separate entity? While that last question might be a little rhetorical or you can answer, all these really hard-hitting questions come to the surface when we look at Traveller 5e. As Jason Cordova, creator of Brindlewood Bay and The Gauntlet, stated, the brilliance of the Traveller 5e campaign is that it's engineered to take advantage of the K-shaped economy. We're going to see more and more of this. Games made to appeal to a tiny, wealthy slice of the market. That's what the whole economy has been for a while. And now it's here for tabletop role-playing games. A K-shaped economy, then, describes an economy where segments of the population struggle while others thrive. In this economy, one segment of people increase their wealth and can pay for more expensive items, while poorer consumers' purchasing power decreases. For businesses, those that serve low income or more niche audiences struggle, while other companies, especially bigger companies, continue to profit, and those profits skyrocket because a wealthier clientele already is bringing in this high revenue. The Fifthification of Traveller and its ability to bring in a huge pool of purchasing from people who have loads of expendable income, while indie developers don't see the success, I think is emblematic of that. You can just see that in the bloating between the two Kickstarter, or rather backer kit pages. You can see that while many of the indie devs that I follow, or many of the indie devs that have games running, have beautiful stylization, beautiful art, unique mechanics, and unique ideas, sadly games like Traveller 5e win out. And like I said, this is not to say that Traveller 5e won't potentially be awesome or great content, or rather a great piece of 5e homebrew material. What I am saying is that transition from Phase 1 to Phase 3, where developers are starting to put more and more pressure on their IPs to create a 5e product rather than something unique, is concerning not only for a creative aspect, but for creatives and artists who don't want to make 5e art or writing or homebrew. They want to create their own separate identity, and more specifically, their own separate game or idea. So thus, the K-shaped economy describes a specific subsect like the tabletop RPG industry. Games should be able to be published and successful without needing to rely on 5e. Traveller 5e, in comparison to other more indie projects still running at the time that I'm recording this, like Midnight and Jubilation, Night Shift, Devil Division by Slightly Reckless Games, or Last Hope, a Dark Magical Girl tabletop RPG by Wendigo's Workshop, as you can see from their pricing and from the money they've made, pale deeply in comparison to, say, Traveller 5e. I think this is a concern about the sustainability for indie developers, as well as how people sometimes have to squash their own creative freedom to survive in the tabletop RPG industry, is what we see in Traveller 5e in comparison to other games. And furthermore, Fifthification. That being said, as I've said, I want to be cordial to people who are interested in Traveller 5e. I don't want to go out there and attack any creator or say that the work in this is, fruitless. While I am skeptical and a bit little sad about the project and what it implies for the industry, this is not the only example of Fifthification either. We can look at Obojima, Lord of the Rings 5e, Wizards of the Oz 5e, or Iron Kingdom 5e to name a couple. No matter the IP or direct inspiration, the creators of these 5e products capitalize on the 5e market because they know that there will be higher and wealthier individuals and organizations who can fund these projects rather than an indie project, or say a game that doesn't fit 5e. Even if the game's material feels disjointed or you lose out on core themes for the sake of fitting into a singular D20 system, Fifthification, I believe, is a process that's worth discussing. I truthfully believe through discussion, effort, and a lot of work and putting emphasis on supporting non-5e products when we can, we will be able to at least push the needle a little bit away from the stranglehold of WotC and the stranglehold of an entire specific game holding the entire tabletop RPG industry hostage. And I also think for those who are interested in 5e, this helps you getting to experience and see other IPs, but not only that, but mechanics will let you see how you can improve your 5e games. And I think that is a net benefit. I think we're already seeing that with how some 5e games start to implement things like clocks or say roles that aren't just simply yes or no's, but ranges to success. And while it's a step in the right direction, I think that also needs to shift financially as well. So I truthfully do believe Fifthification is a process worth talking about. Now, could I be wrong? Yes, and I would love if you let me know down below in the comment section if I'm wrong or if you have any particularly strong thoughts. And once you're done commenting, let me know your thoughts on Stars Without Number, which is a really awesome sci-fi RPG that if you have a sci-fi itch, I think you're going to love. And with that, we'll hit it off with my Patreon supporters, Harrison Parker and Logan, for your continued support. You too can support me over at Patreon over here, as well as my coffee over here. And with that, I'm your average everyday queer traveler. Blurry disposition of y'all. Have an awesome day. Ciao.